Good morning, one and all. We are happy to welcome you at the National Institute of Advanced Studies for this conference. We now begin with the inaugural session. May I request Professor Rajaram Nagappa, Head of the International Strategic and Security Studies Program at NIAS, for introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaveri. Ambassador S Seshadri, Vice Chairman, RIS, Dr. Baldev, Director, NIAS, our distinguished invitees and participants from Myanmar and Japan, our other participants from our country, my colleagues from NIAS, ISSP, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to all of you. As Kaveri said, my name is Rajaram Nagappa. I am with the International Strategic and Security Studies program at NIAS, and this is the program which is hosting today's conference. I join Kaveri in wishing you all a very warm welcome here. I hope you've had a comfortable stay and you're ready to go through the ordeals of the next 3 days of deep discussions and deliberations. This conference, I have a slight personal interest in terms of I was myself born in Burma in Inaugural, and I was very happy to meet the people from Burma, the scientists and the specialists who have assembled here. Especially I was pleased to meet Mr. So Mint, who himself is a micropaleontologist, seems to have known my father and my father's works. So it was a very, very pleasant meeting with the people here. So let me add a special welcome to all of you again. As it always happens, I think there have been a few anxious moments for our foreign participants, especially related to the visa. But thanks to our last-minute efforts, the Ministry of Home Affairs, External Affairs all gave the clearances. And Mayanmar, my colleague, put in very, very special efforts. I'd like to thank them because we are happy that your problems are solved in time and you could all come here. Myanmar, needless to say, is our important and immediate neighbor in the east. And we have a long land boundary, 1,600 kilometers with them, a maritime boundary in the strategically important Andaman Sea, which stretches into the Bay of Bengal. And among the two countries, we have long years of shared historical, ethnic, cultural, and religious linkages. And this underscores the advantage of our constructive engagement like you've been doing in the last few times, and especially today. There are very, very positive winds of change in the region. The political and economic transitions in Myanmar have been significant and have naturally aroused considerable interest both within the region and internationally. Active engagement with the government and the people of Myanmar is already taking place and is poised for increased momentum after the elections in November. Obviously, it has drawn India's attention too, and it was during the ASEAN meeting of May 2014 in Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi unveiled India's new Act East policy. This signals how serious India is regarding boosting ties in the region. In this light, this conference, Myanmar at the Crossroads, Current Realities, Challenges and Opportunities, is not only topical and relevant, but also aims at exploring Myanmar's aspirations, juxtaposition of these aspirations among a host of issues. And this conference intends to deliberate upon and discuss the dynamics of the transition in Myanmar, what it means for the world today and in particular to our own country, India. The agenda of the conference has been organized to elicit how the transition in Myanmar will evolve, what could be its impact on politics, economy, society of the country, and Myanmar's relation with other parts. The conference also intends to address the developments that are shaping the internal dynamics apart from mapping challenges and opportunities in Myanmar. And finally, the development linkages of India's northeast and a sustainable and coherent posture become significant to serve the interests of both countries. We hope the conference will provide us some key answers. And for these answers, we have to examine how far reaching are the changes in Myanmar. Are they going to be having some level of permanency? Are they going to be irreversible? Post-general elections, which are slated for November, will the reform momentum gather further? Will be on a positive track? And what lies ahead in Myanmar? Are the current engagements between India and Myanmar adequate? What is required for enhancing these engagements and cooperation? Importance of the stability in Myanmar's periphery vis-a-vis India's own northeastern region, and what are the challenges and opportunities that exist in India in Myanmar for India and in particular for the Indian industry. These are some of the issues we'd like to examine around here. These questions indeed will be the subject of the conference, and I'm sure the deliberations of this conference will aid in identifying recommendations for policy matters to strengthen the relation between our two countries. We are delighted that Ambassador Seshadri has accepted our invitation to deliver the keynote address. He has deep insight into Myanmar. He was served as ambassador there in the past, and I'm sure his presence and insight will add significant value to our further deliberations here. I wish you all a very pleasant stay in our beautiful campus, and wish you all a very period of intense and productive deliberations over the next 2.5 days. Before I close and say thank you, I'd like to just say my colleague Mail, who has taken a lot of trouble in organizing this conference, has unfortunately taken ill and he'll not be available with us today. Hopefully, if he's better, he'll join us tomorrow or day after tomorrow. In his absence, Arun, my colleague, he is handling you in case this one, and we have 3 young musketeers. Kaveri is here, I don't see Suparna and Ramya, this one. There they are. And our office help, Ms. Sandhya there. So if you have any requirement, this one, please don't hesitate to contact any of us. One more request is, may I request all of you to switch off the mobile, because even on silent mode, the public address system picks up the disturbance. So thank you.
May I now request Dr. Baldev Raj, Director NIAS, to give the welcome address.
Thank you, Kaveri. Ambassador Seshadri, Professor Rajaram Nagappa, distinguished participants from Myanmar, Japan, and our colleagues from India, my own colleagues here in NIAS. My job is to welcome you. And welcoming means resisting from making comments on the theme of the conference, howsoever endearing that subject may be to you, because there are going to be better people who are going to speak on that. This institute was born about 27 years back, and J.R.D. Tata, a well-known industrialist, but more important, to my mind, a human being par excellence, and diplomat and a global citizen of unparalleled dimensions, thought of there must be some place where people can get together, not only from India, but from all over the world, to discuss things beyond barriers. Very carefully, he brought together the people who were from education, social sciences, science and technology, policies, and every discipline you could think of. In fact, we always welcome as our colleagues and students the people who don't know the boundaries and who still have deep knowledge in some domain and who are able to contribute. Over 27 years, we have built up credible reputation to discuss some of the challenging subjects and find the directions. I'm sure you would find the campus very attractive, stay comfortable, and you would carry back the memories. But we have also a self-interest that in addition to carrying the memories away from this place, you give some memories to you, to us, which we want to retain. We'd like to build enduring relation with you, at least some of you, to work together on some of the things which would come out of the deliberations. As Professor Rajaram Nagappa mentioned, Myanmar is extremely important for India. You can see from the happenings in India, Myanmar and China that the transitions taking place in Myanmar can be considered as opportunities, but can also pose very major challenges. Particularly what attracts me is the transition to democracy. The transition to democracy, any transition in life, requires extraordinary skills to manage, and especially when the countries go through the transition. And I believe here India can play a constructive role to enable this transition to happen. Of course, it would require collaboration in the area of defense. It would require collaboration in the area of linkages at the political level, and also it would require the commitment of the people to have the relation. And that is where perhaps India has a great advantage, because the ties between Myanmar and India are not based on last 50 years or 100 years. It are based on centuries. The people understanding of each other is very large. In a way, culturally, we are twined with each other to be able to understand and do something together. I have participated in many programs with respect to science for policies and policies for science. While in the program I don't find any specific mention of the science, I believe it is science and technology which is very important part of transforming the country. If you look at India's own story after our getting independence, it was some towering scientists who made a good difference to our country and gave us confidence that we can progress on the path of removing inequalities and providing good quality of life, and also have a justifiable place in the arena of the world. I'd propose to Ambassador S Seshadri and all of you that can we work on outstanding young scientists and technologists from both the countries to come and discuss what are their aspirations and what they can learn to bring a better quality of life in the two countries, and how they would work individually and together to be able to transform the country. NIAS would be delighted to host such a meeting. In fact, 3 months down the line, we are going to have young scientists and technologists meeting from BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, meeting here to see what are the aspirations and what we can do to give a quality of life. I'd also feel that like there in any issue, there are certain very visible points, and sometimes we get blinded by those points, like mineral resources, the defense and all that. To me, the sublime point in any enduring relation is the culture, heritage, commitment and education of the people. To my mind, that is the glue of a relation which sustains over a long period. And I think we should not ignore that. And again, NIAS is a good place, and NIAS with RIS becomes excellent synergy, and we have been talking of working together with RIS to be able to do something which would become as a big input to the Prime Minister when he is planning to visit sometime very soon to Myanmar. We must be ambitious enough to provide something which is not very visible, but which can be very valuable to enduring a relation. We should commit our resources to be able to work on those of the aspects which are latent but which are very valuable in our enduring relations. And I, as a director of NIAS, and with complete confidence in Professor Rajaram Nagappa and his group, the intensity and the spread of their expertise, we definitely would like to be a participant and a change agent at this crucial moment where in the next 10 years or so, it could make a lot of difference that what Myanmar would be and how India and Myanmar both would gain, because this is a win-win relation. This is a relation where it is not that one country is looking at the other country with respect to getting something. I think it can be a relation which can be very enjoyable, which can be very enriching, which can be endearing to the citizens of both the countries and still produce something which can be exemplary. Thank you very much for coming to NIAS and being here. 2.5 days is a good time to enjoy, to discuss, to make friends, and I'm sure all that would happen in the next 2.5 days. Thank you very much.
May I now request Ambassador V S Seshadri to deliver the keynote address. Ambassador V S Seshadri is the Vice Chairman of the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi, and former Ambassador of India to Myanmar during the years 2010 to 2013. Ambassador V S Seshadri.
Dr. Baldev Raj, Director of the National Institute of Advanced Study, Professor Rajaram Nagappa, His Excellency Mr. Kin Maung Win, the former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Myanmar, Ambassador Saurabh Kumar, my distinguished former senior colleague in the Foreign Service, Dr. Mail, who unfortunately could not be here today, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and Mingalabar to our Myanmar colleagues. Let me first of all thank NIAS for inviting me today to your very important conference and for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on how to build enduring bonds with Myanmar. And particularly, I feel very honored after what the director, Dr. Baldev Raj, mentioned about the background to the Institute. So I really feel honored to be here. Allow me also to congratulate your institute for recognizing the importance of Myanmar and hosting a 3-day conference covering a whole range of issues. The concept note for the conference has brought them out with great clarity. Myanmar is a friendly neighboring country with whom we share long maritime and land borders and with whom we already have good relations. There are no fundamental issues, boundary or otherwise, on which we have differences. The question before us is how can we build a more sound and long-term relationship? I would like to place this in today's context. I will therefore spend a little time on internal developments in Myanmar and what its evolving foreign policy orientation looks like before moving on to the main theme on the bilateral plane. In the last 4 years or so, since the new government led by President Thein Sein came into office, after 50 years of military rule, there has been a remarkable transformation in the country. Reforms have brought about more political freedom, release of political prisoners, return of exiles, media freedom, participation of Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD in the political process, even if in a limited way, and much else. Parliament is functioning as an active deliberative body and currently holding its 12th session, passing laws, and the president himself has come across as someone who wants to build peace, including with the ethnic rebel groups and to promote development. There are no doubt some criticisms about how powers have not been devolved to states and no decentralization, or about how certain crony companies continue to benefit from government contracts. But in the overall, I would consider the world opinion to be that progress has exceeded expectations, and more importantly, all this has happened in a fairly smooth manner. Economic reforms and opening up have helped in speeding growth, and there is now tremendous interest worldwide, more so from countries in East and Southeast Asia, to trade with and invest in Myanmar. If all goes well, resource-rich Myanmar should get out of being designated as a least developed country very soon, and also perhaps emerge as a middle-income country by the end of next decade. I fully endorse the director's remarks that we have to look at Myanmar, what it will be 10 years ahead. On the foreign policy front, Myanmar today can be said to be well on the way to joining the international mainstream. Already, many milestones have been crossed, including having hosted the Southeast Asian Games in 2013, being the chair of ASEAN and BIMSTEC, and recently it also hosted the CLMV Summit. Myanmar received praise for its role as ASEAN chair in treading a consensus path than applying one point of view a la Cambodia earlier. Myanmar's relations with China has certainly seen a reset. We have seen this in the suspension of the Mitsone Dam project, in the reconfiguring of the Letpadong copper mine project, and most recently in the handling of the Kokang conflict. Myanmar is inherently a very nationalistic and a proud nation, and a stronger Myanmar will not take kindly to neighbors taking it for granted in terms of inequitable exploitation of its natural resources or assisting its rebels. While relations with China will continue to remain multidimensional and strong, but Myanmar's red lines can be expected to keep evolving as its dependence becomes less on China for its military supplies or investments, or for the large market that Yunnan offers for its agricultural products. China may have to adjust to this if it wants to keep up the special relationship so as not to jeopardize dividends flowing from existing long-term investments like the oil and gas pipeline or other projects. Relations with the West have meanwhile improved, and the economic opportunities will only see them strengthen further. Japan has begun taking a huge interest and is also pumping in much assistance. They are not only participating in the Thilawa Special Economic Zone near Yangon in a major way, but a few days ago they also signed to the Dawei ACZ along with Myanmar and Thailand. Korea too is doing its bit, and one can foresee companies from these two countries playing a big role in Myanmar's trade and investment profile in the years to come. Myanmar's Southeast Asian neighbors, in particular Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia, are also not letting the opportunity pass, and you can see all of them mounting great efforts towards securing business deals for their companies. More than half of all FDI inflows in 2014, amounting to US dollars 4.3 billion, for example, came from Singapore alone. And Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia are also very active. On the other hand, inflows from China were only US dollars 500 million last year. All these will no doubt shape Myanmar's foreign policy orientation in due course of time. Of course, much will depend on whether Myanmar can continue to reform while maintaining internal peace. In this regard, the elections to be held later this year, the constitutional reforms under discussion, and the ethnic peace process underway, all of them will have a profound impact. It's clear from the discussions on the proposed constitutional amendments last month that the armed forces are determined to maintain their presence up to 25% in the parliament, at least for some time to come. The voting on the amendments indicated that they are also not agreeable to reducing the majority required for constitutional amendments to be less than 75%, in effect, keeping with them a veto on any change. And there is also no prospect of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi becoming the president, since there is going to be no change to Article 59F that prohibits anyone having foreigner children from the post. But if elections are held in a free and fair manner in November this year, and it may be difficult for the system to do otherwise now, particularly with a freer media and greater social activism, it is quite possible that Aung San Suu Kyi and her NLD would make a very good showing. Even though her stand on a few issues has perhaps dented her all-round support somewhat, she is still very, very popular. The USDP, that is the Union Social Democratic Party, which is the military-backed party, has also made her task somewhat easier, since she can present herself as a victim not only vis-à-vis the military, but also vis-à-vis the USDP. Why do I say this? The constitutional amendment proposed on Article 59F last month, largely by the USDP, even if it had been adopted, would not have enabled her to be eligible for the president's post. It only sought to remove the ban resulting from children-in-law being foreigners that would have benefited the Yangon chief minister if he wanted to try becoming a vice president again, but not Aung San Suu Kyi. Differences are also reported between the USDP, that is chaired now by Tura Shwe Man, the lower house speaker, and President Thein Sein and his cabinet colleagues. If the USDP does not approach the elections as a united house, it may only further help NLD, which is also seeking to build coalition with some ethnic parties. But will NLD get a majority of its own? This remains to be seen. With 25% of the seats reserved for the military, a simple majority in the parliament will translate into 2/3 majority of all elected seats. And the ethnic parties, particularly in the Shan, Rakhine, Kachin, and Chin states, are strong. And for NLD to get elected in those states won't be easy. The situation could be particularly challenging in the upper house that has equal seat for each of the 7 states and the 7 regions. The newly elected parliament can be expected to be convened in January next year. On the other hand, the new government headed by a president who is to be elected by that parliament will assume office towards end March. Some are hoping that if NLD and the ethnic parties win a large percentage of votes in the November election, there is still a possibility for the new parliament to change Article 59F before they get on to electing the new president. This will, however, still require at least some military members of parliament from their 25% to vote in favor. Whether the military will give in faced with that scenario where they see a overwhelming majority acquired by Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and other ethnic parties remains to be seen. If, on the other hand, Aung San Suu Kyi is not able to make it, despite her party and the ethnics having a large majority, who will NLD nominate for election to the high post This is being speculated very much, and there is also a suggestion that the lady working with the lower house speaker, they get along quite well, that he could possibly be the candidate. It remains to be seen. Irrespective of whatever happens, one can perhaps surmise that Myanmar is unlikely to go back to its military rule. The country now has a crop of responsible leaders, including President Thein Sein, the lower house speaker Shweman, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the armed forces chief, who are mature enough to chart a responsible course. Civil society groups are also getting to be active, including the 88 student group, some of whom have become social activists, and certain of whom may also contest elections. No one in Myanmar, including the military, would want to revert to its earlier isolationist situation. The ethnic peace process is still work in progress. The national ceasefire agreement is yet to be signed by all groups, and many deadlines set have come and gone, and some are hoping that this can still be done before 8th August, the last date for announcement of candidates for the elections. There are still some pending issues, even after the draft has been initialed by some groups. Issues like need for a federal army, code of conduct during ceasefire, etc., are still being aired. There is also the demand by the ethnic armed groups for the 3 groups involved in the Kokang conflict to also sign the agreement at the same time as others, but the government is not in favor. On the other hand, the military looks at the process as more leading to disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Violent clashes are still reported from Kachin and Shan states, and most recently also in Karen state. I will not go into details here, but the main issue at this point is this. Will the ethnic groups and the government be able to conclude the ceasefire agreement before the elections, so that the elections could then be held in all the regions rather than some of them being left out of voting? This is what happened last time in certain parts of the Kachin state and also in a few other areas. There is also the Rohingya issue that Myanmar may have to address seriously than just deeming them as Bengalis. While this may not happen in an election year, this could form an important task for the new government. Let me now turn to bilateral relations and see how we can try to build more enduring bonds of friendship in the context of a new emerging Myanmar that I described. As I said earlier, we already have very friendly relations with Myanmar, and these are multifaceted. There have been regular high-level political exchanges, more so after the transition underway in Myanmar. Ties between our defense forces are also very good, with frequent exchanges of high-level visits, regular dialogues at different levels, cooperation in training programs, and so on. India has also been at the forefront in terms of offering training and development assistance under our technical cooperation programs, ranging from cyclone relief to agricultural development. In the context of what the director mentioned earlier, I may mention here that we have 3 particular projects that may be of interest to this group. One is India is involved in setting up Myanmar Institute of Information Technology at Mandalay. In fact, the mentor institution for this is IIIT Bangalore, and the group was headed by Mr. Ramadurai, who had visited along with IIIT Bangalore, and I understand the first group of students are beginning the course this year. If this becomes a center of learning, imagine the impact it would have 10 years hence in this center of excellence producing 100, 200, or 300 graduates who could be as good as anyone in the world. Likewise, we have set up a Center for Agricultural Research in Azin, Agricultural University near Naypyidaw, and this was again mentored by Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who had come there. And It was thought that the two countries had a lot in common because we have crops, rice, pulses, and oil seeds. And the Institute is supposed to work on these issues in a joint collaborative way with Indian Council for Agricultural Research also participating very much in this program. Thirdly, we have initiated a program of trip by management students in Mandalay visiting IIM Bangalore every year now for about 2 to 3 weeks, when they can get an orientation program, not only with the faculty, but also with businesses that are assembled by the IIM Bangalore. So these are the kind of examples that can be win-win partnerships in terms of promoting development programs that will have a long-term impact. We also share very close cultural ties. Buddhism has strong adherents in Myanmar, and our links on this score can continue to contribute towards building bonds. In the present context of a changing Myanmar that I outlined earlier, the various conducive factors already present in our relations do give us an advantage. All the possible contenders for the top post have also visited India in recent years. But we need to also deal with some of the challenges that remain or are coming up. These include the continuing cross-border insurgency issue. The killing of 18 soldiers of our armed forces by some of the Northeast militant groups in June has brought this festering issue to the fore. It is good that Myanmar is showing some responsiveness to our serious concern, and we may soon have a high-level visit of an armed forces delegation led by their Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces. Clearly, a more durable solution and perhaps a fresh approach is necessary than denials as before. Myanmar itself, being faced with similar problems on its borders, would perhaps understand this very well. We have been helping Myanmar with road building equipment that can be used to improve access to some of the remote areas in their Naga self-administered zone. We have also been assisting them in a regional development project for the Chin state, that is on the other side of Mizoram, and their Naga area, that is on the other side of our 3 states, that is Arunachal, Nagaland, and northern Manipur. That is focused on building more rural roads, schools, and primary health care centers. Training their Naga farmers with cardamom cultivation has been another effort. All these can perhaps be further strengthened if necessary. All these issues, as well as others, appear to have been dealt with in the just concluded first Foreign Minister level Joint Commission meeting held in New Delhi last week. The joint statement issued has stressed the need for sound border management, and the two sides have agreed to enable early conclusion of a bilateral MOU on movement of people across the land border. It has called for resolution of the issue of unsettled border pillars in all sectors, and the India-Myanmar Joint Working Group has been given a mandate to address all outstanding boundary issues. A joint visit is also to be arranged to the India-Myanmar border in Nagaland sector following the raid against the rebels which took place. What would be important is prompt and effective follow-up action on the decisions taken and the commitments made, including the assurance that both sides have given in the joint statement that territories of either country will not be allowed to be used for activities inimical to the other. What can consolidate and reinforce these actions will be closer cooperation between the two armed forces, and here it is welcome that India, in the joint statement, India has offered to support modernization of Myanmar's armed forces. The soon-to-take-place visit of the Myanmar Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces offers the opportunity to work out further details of military-to-military cooperation in all the areas. There is also the urgent need to regulate our border trade in a manner that is mutually beneficial. It is not just a problem of informal and unaccounted trade that is taking place in Moreh in Manipur and Zokalthar in Mizoram at the border posts. That the Reserve Bank of India circular, which is supposed to regulate border trade, is totally out of touch with reality and is followed in the least, is only a part of the problem. Lack of scrutiny and regulation where they are needed, and over-regulation in certain other ways in the name of security have given rise to a whole lot of undesirable activities. Insurgent elements take advantage in the process. These need to be dealt with eternally on the one hand, harmonizing border trade regulation and putting in place smooth transit arrangements will also need discussions with Myanmar. Our setting up an integrated checkpost at Moreh that is under construction affords this opportunity. Building a large township at Moreh that can become a hub of trading activity and providing services like hospital facilities, diagnostic centers, and educational facilities that can also be used by people in Upper Myanmar could be a good idea. This can also generate employment, particularly for the youth. There is already the example of Myanmar's border trade with China at Muse Ruili, which can offer some good practices. We have also committed to several connectivity projects in Myanmar. These include the Trilateral Highway, the Kaladan project, and the Ritidim Road project. We have talked about these for a long time, and they are still at various stages of progress. Completing them in a time-bound manner will hugely contribute to the development of both Western Myanmar and our own Northeast. I won't go into details here, but refer you to the report brought out by RIS, that is the institution where I'm the vice chairman, on how we can use these connectivity corridors that we are seeking to build and transform them into development corridors. This is the report that we have brought out, and I'm leaving a copy with the director with a request that it could be kept in the library. Needless to add that they will bring goodwill and generate and more people-to-people ties on either side of border. Two other aspects may be important here. One is sequencing the connectivity efforts so that our own internal road and other infrastructure leading up to the border is in place before full connectivity is sought to be established beyond. Secondly, ushering in an element of competition between Manipur and Mizoram in fostering border trade and related development may be useful. And what I would say, after all that I have said on the issue of security and insurgency situation, the border trade and connectivity and development corridors, is that all these issues are interrelated. There can be synergistic gains from each to the other, and the two countries can collaborate for win-win solutions. Another area posing a challenge is the inadequate participation of India's private sector in Myanmar's fast-progressing trade and investment scenario. The economic opportunities next door have not been sufficiently availed of by Indian companies, and ultimately political ties will also be determined by economic interlinkages. For instance, India is not even a recipient of one foreign banking license, and Myanmar has offered 9 of them to foreign banks last year. And compare this with the 1950s, when India's 7 banks had a presence in Myanmar. So where is the gap? During the recent Joint Commission meeting, I noticed that the joint statement makes a request from the Indian side for enabling a banking presence, I think this needs urgent attention. But the private sector will not be able to win large projects on their own in Myanmar without some government support, including in the form of financing packages. Also, participation and involvement in the development of emerging special economic zones and other industrial zones will require a cluster approach and certain level of coordination, making it easy and competitive to do business with Myanmar with better air and sea connectivity and banking facilitation also becomes crucial, and all these need attention. So, what I have mentioned are some of the possible ways to help strengthen our bonds with Myanmar. There can be many more, which can also help in Myanmar serving as a land bridge between India and Southeast Asia. Developing closer ties with Myanmar deserve no less attention than other neighbors. This conference has a wide-ranging agenda that gives the time to look at all these issues in great detail. You have also assembled a very distinguished panel of academics, journalists, business representatives, and experts, not only from India and Myanmar, but also from other friendly countries. I wish your conference every success. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, please.
May I know your expert assessment on the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, in relation to Myanmar, India, the future collaborations?
As you know, India is a founder member of AIIB, just as Myanmar is. So AIIB is still at very formative stages. We have to see how it evolves, but our hope and expectation is that it turns out to be a very useful development bank for the Asia region, funding a lot of infrastructure activities that remain to be developed. And I think there are very many possibilities that can happen. And with governance now, developing countries having a greater say, we hope that our voice in terms of how such projects, development projects should be taken forward, we will have a forum to show as an example how this can be done. But of course, this needs the cooperation of all other members of AIIB, which remains to be seen.
Sir, how would you propose to deal with the informal trade between India and Myanmar? How would you propose to go about it? Because the informal trade, the volume is far more than the formal trade. So what would be your solution, sir?
This is about informal trade.
So, yes, sir. How do you put an end? I mean, I also, how do you channelize it and how do you make it formal, sir?
Well, it's a complex issue. It needs attention from all sides. You will find that there is one chapter in this publication devoted almost entirely to this topic, because I had traveled also to the China-Myanmar border to see how border trade works there. And there are many good practices that prevail there that we can make use of. But I would say that simply RBI coming up with a new circular will not change everything. There are too many players involved in this informal trade, and it will have to be also linked with creating opportunities for people who benefit now from the informal trade to also benefit from a more formal version of this informal trade. Because unless you are able to ensure that people who may stand to lose from the present informal trade arrangement are taken care of in some way, they will ensure that we do not move towards that formal trade. So it requires a lot of preparation. It also requires discussing with Myanmar how to transform this into a new modern system, because there are several issues involved here. What is the currency that will be used? In the border trade with China, it is the Chinese currency that is used largely, although it's not said so in black and white, but this is what happens. So we have to have certain understanding, certain arrangements by which this can be taken forward. I mean, within the short time, it will be very difficult for me to detail out, but these are listed there in this report, which is also accessible on the RIS website.
So you mentioned about that banking sector, that we did not have any presence in Myanmar. And also we heard that we have strong cultural ties and more than a century-old ties with Myanmar. In this respect, I would like to ask you about, since you are been there and practitioner, that how do you see the role of Indian community in Myanmar? Once they were the backbone of the Myanmar or the Burmese economy, especially the Indian communities. Now it seems that the role has been marginalized, or there's no role at all. And even in the government, even in the bilateral talks, their status is not been discussed much between India and Myanmar. So what is the role of the Indian ethnic Indian community in Myanmar? And do you see any kind of the return of the active role by the Indian community given this the transition time?
Now, the Indian community there is a large one. There are no precise numbers, but my own estimate is it's fairly large, belonging to people from various parts of India, from Tamil Nadu to Punjab. And this has happened over the colonial period. People have moved there. Some have returned back, but some have remained. And today, they are very much part of the Myanmar life and economic life particularly. And they are contributing to the various economic sectors in Myanmar. And they're also participating in a lot of trading activities, acting as trading agents or various other facilities. And you will find, if you go to Myanmar, that they also have, the Myanmar has allowed them to pursue their own faith with no obstacles. They have their temples, and they are able to engage in various cultural activities. Certainly, they could be of assistance if there are business proposals that are sought to be pushed forward by Indian groups. Maybe that could be an idea. But I do not see them doing it better than Myanmar. I mean, they're all Myanmar people now living there. So, while of course we retain affinity in terms of cultural bonds, etc., but more than that, to give them a special role, as it were, we don't do it as a country to our ethnic population anywhere. But certainly they have contributed a large measure. Various fields, if you go to Myanmar, you will find that aloo puri is an accepted breakfast. Ras malai is a very favorite dessert. All this has come about through these. The lungi, the bottom part of the men's garment, has originated, you can say, to some extent from India, although I'm not sure if Myanmar will accept this claim, but these are all issues that you will see when you go there.
Good morning, sir. My name is Ramya PS. I am from ISSSP. My question was sort of related to the previous one. When you're talking about such deep cultural linkages, etc., how far is the current push by the Indian government to rejuvenate the relationship with Myanmar?
How far is the
push by the government, the current government of India towards Myanmar? not in terms of visits, but in terms of tangible results?
In terms of?
Tangible results.
No, I think the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, visited Myanmar last November. Of course, that was not a purely bilateral visit. It was for an ASEAN meeting. We have also had subsequently number of bilateral visitors. Our foreign minister was there, external affairs minister. Their vice president came to India in January this year. Their foreign minister has come just now, last week, when the joint consultative committee meeting was held. And as I mentioned to you also, the chief of the armed forces, commander-in-chief, is likely to visit soon. These are very high-level visits. And visits are indicative of the interest that is there between two countries. I also mentioned to you about the agreement reached last week that is set out in the joint statement about what the two countries propose to do. And these are not only on the border issues, boundary issues, etc. But I did not go on, into detail on the rest of the issues. But there are also several of the other issues on the development cooperation side, on the business side, including about the banks that find a reference there. So there is a lot of attention. I think the new government is also giving to these, and Myanmar is too important for any government in India to give it any less attention. But Myanmar is changing, and we need to approach this with perhaps a fresh approach, not only in terms of improving business contact, which maybe through SEZs and various other options, but also through the unique advantage that we have in terms of Northeast India and western part of Myanmar being contiguous. No other country in the world is in that advantageous position to be able to bring out synergies that we are well positioned to do, and the opportunities are endless.
Very much for all the opportunities that we have in Myanmar for the Indian investors. One very good example why Indian investors should not be hesitate to invest in Myanmar. We have ONGC, VDash, and GAIL. They have already invested in two big projects in the petroleum industry of Myanmar. One is the Shui gas field project. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and they are already owning something like 17% by ONGC and GAIL about 9%. In fact, they are already getting the fruit of all these ventures, billions of dollars per year. And at the same time, they have a share in the Myanmar-China gas pipeline. ONGC about 8.3% and GAIL about 4.2%. So of course, the risks are there, but the risk does bear fruit also. Thank you very much.
Your point is well taken, but I think you also know that in terms of Myanmar's investment stock today, if you look at the ranking, India is number 11. Now, that's not a good rank for a neighboring country, which is a large country, which is next door. If you look at in terms of imports into Myanmar, India is number 7. Now, that is what we need to look at. A country as large as India has to be number 2 or number 3 on these counts. And for that, a great effort is needed by both sides. It is not just by India, because it is very important to see that many of the development projects that I mentioned, like the IT project in Mandalay, now this can get reinforced if we can build on this and consolidate IT investments of various kinds. These connectivity corridors that we will seek to build in Myanmar, these are enabling corridors. You have to make use of those corridors in terms of investment, in terms of building other opportunities. That is what we need to look at even today even before those projects come into play, we need to see how we can make use of them and start investing or thinking about plans for investing right now.
Excellency, thank you very much for your very insightful speech. Yesterday night, I fly from Bangkok over the Dawei and Bengal Bay and Chennai and Bangalore. How do you assess the development of the Dawei project? Now the Japan decided to participate at that. And how do you evaluate the impact the project on your economy too?
I thought I should ask you this question, because you have just now signed the trilateral agreement between Japan, Thailand, and Myanmar. Because initially it was a project which was mooted between Thailand and Myanmar. It didn't go very far. Now, Thailand made a mistake. It initially proposed that the way will have all the industries that Thailand did not want on its soil, particularly the polluting industries. Now, that was not received well in Myanmar. Now, maybe they have now alternative plans, and you have alternative plans in terms of how Dawei can be developed. Dawei is uniquely positioned because it is on the same latitude as Chennai. And there are very many historical connections that exist. And from Dawei, if there is a link to Bangkok and then to Vietnam, then we are seeing a lot many more possibilities in terms of goods, services being able to reach all these economies in a short space of time. So I would think the opportunities are immense, but it depends on the kind of pool of industries that you are able to put together. Dawei, incidentally, is a 24/7 port. That's again a huge advantage. But the ethnic peace process have to resolve the Karen issue, which hopefully they will. And then if it is going to be a very peaceful area, the opportunities are tremendous.
Is there any military investments of China in Myanmar?
Is there
any military investments, Chinese military investments in Myanmar?
I don't know what you mean by investment.
Like in the port development?
China is even today the #1 military supplier.
Sir, considering the limited presence of India in Myanmar and considering the opportunities which we have, will there be, what would you suggest, what kind of a coherent strategy, a multidimensional strategy, coherent strategy or a multidimensional strategy which the government of India has to adopt, considering our strength in many fields, including science and technology? It is not only investment, but help and cooperation. In what way it can enhance our presence there? Thank you.
Yeah, it's something that I cannot suggest like that off the cuff. It needs planning. But I think we have by now established certain training centers in Myanmar. There is a center for enhancement of IT skills that has been set up in Yangon. There are 2 industrial training centers which are great successes, one in Pakoku and one in Mingyan. We have set up one on Entrepreneurship Development Center in Myanmar. Now, fortunately, these have been doing well. And also, I mentioned earlier about MIIT, about the agriculture. I think we need to use these existing institutions rather than putting in additional ones at this stage, consolidate them, make them grow further. and see if private sector can also help in that process to make them further blossom. But the coherent strategy that you are talking about is important. I think that's what I mentioned, because private sector, you know the way Japan is approaching Myanmar. Tilawa, SEZ, there are 3 Japanese companies coming together with JICA, pulling in some money, and they have taken 49% of the Tilawa SEZ. So you do it in a manner where risks are shared in some ways, and you also coordinate planning, financing, with JICA taking on certain assistance that can be given, which the private sector may not be willing to give. So you have to pool and come up with a strategy. The way also I think they are going ahead in the same fashion. That's a far better approach than just expecting that one Indian company will go to Myanmar and get a contract. That's not so simple.
Thank you, Ambassador Seshadri, for your succinct remarks and valuable time. May I now request Dr. Arun Vishwanathan, Assistant Professor with ISSP NIAS, to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaveri. Let me begin by thanking Ambassador Seshadri for that wonderful talk. You have set the keynote address is set at the broad parameters of the conference and brought out many key important points which we hope to discuss during the 3 days of the conference. So thank you, sir, for that. This is also during Ambassador Seshadri's talk a key connecting point between NIAS and what is the involvement of Dr. Ramadurai and also Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, both of whom are the current and former chairman of the governing council of NIAS. So they already have a foundation to build on and hope to do that in the near future. Here I am purely on behalf of Dr. Mail, who unfortunately has taken ill and cannot come, and he wanted me to come and thank each and every one of you for taking the time, valuable time, and coming, traveling to NIAS and being part of this conference. Thank you so much. And we have a tradition here that we have a group photograph with all the participants. So could I request all of you to join us for that and then for tea.